The more we act with that spirit and that intention, the less the karma sticks to us. Good morning, everyone. Well, as you can tell, the subject this morning is about the law of karma. And I read something fun this week. Some of you may have seen it as well. That, let's see, how does it go? My reality check just bounced. And that's what it feels like sometimes with the law of karma, you know, that pendulum that just swings back and forth, back and forth. Every action has a reaction, and it's endless. I remember once there was a man that I was working with who was he was very smart, and he was sharp with his tongue and sort of difficult to get along with. And I would react, you know, he'd say something unkind or mean, and I would just react. And I just kept praying about this, and I just asked Yogananda, who is my guru, whose teachings we practice here, I just kept asking him, help me not to react. You know, the whole karmic law is that of reaction. And so then I started noticing that would happen. He would try to puncture me, and I was able to see it for what it was, even have a little bit compassion for him for having to express these thoughts. And then, but I couldn't, I could go into neutral gear, but I couldn't go into the positive gear of actually expressing kindness in return. But at least I didn't react. And for all of us, that's sort of what the spiritual life is like. It's about slowing down the reactive process. And that's what meditation is about. It helps us to slow down that reactive process. You see, the karmic law is a little bit like gravity. It's a force. It's like a natural law. It exists in duality. It's always there. And it pulls on us. It can't, you know, the more we have certain thoughts or have certain actions, we draw more and more of that to ourselves. That's why Yogananda explains that satsang is so important. Satsang is spiritual fellowship, companionship, being in the company of saints. And when I look around this room, I see lots of them. And I am so grateful for the choice of, I want to be here with all of us striving for that sanctity. Swami Kriyananda, Yogananda's direct disciple and the founder of Ananda, describes when he was a young man in his early 20s living with Yogananda. Yogananda asking him one day, what keeps the earth spinning around the sun, yeah? And Kriyananda thought he needed a lesson or was asking for a lesson in astronomy. So he said it's the magnetism of the sun that keeps that happening. And Yogananda says, well, why doesn't the earth just, collapse into the sun. And Yogananda said it's the centrifugal force of the earth. In other words, it's that the earth is keeping itself at a distance from the sun. And it was only sometime later that Kriyananda understood he was talking about the soul. He was talking about us. That God is constantly trying to magnetize us to God. And we, have this centrifugal force that keeps pulling away. And it keeps us going in circles and circles and circles, literally. That's what the karmic law does when we keep acting and reacting in duality. There's actually I was going to mention a couple of examples. The story goes that there was a man before World War II who anticipated the war coming, and he looked on the globe and he tried to find a place where the war was not likely to be happening. And he picked Guam, and he went to Guam and to live there, and that's exactly where the war in the Pacific landed, was in its greatest force. We can't escape these things. When I first moved to Ananda Village in California, it was 1973, and I was 22 at that point. And even back then, Swami Kriyananda used to periodically talk to us about Yogananda explaining that we're going to go through some difficult times in the near future. And so I had very little. I had about $1,500, and I purchased silver and gold. And I, had this little batch, and next to my rustic cabin, I dug a hole and I put the silver and the gold. And a few years later, I had the opportunity to purchase a slightly larger cottage. And so I did, and the only money I had was that silver and gold, so I dug it up. I exchanged it. It had more than tripled in value at that point, and I purchased the little cottage for cash. And 3 days later, a fire came through Ananda Village, destroyed 21 out of our 22 homes, including the one I had just paid for in cash. It was gone, poof. And I was young enough, my life was in front of me still, that it didn't bother me. It happened, and I realized, wow, that's not where I can put my security. I need to work on my inner life so that I can be calm no matter what happens on the outside, even if everything I have goes up in smoke, literally. And so the karmic law is always at play. And for some reason, I had some sense of security with that money. And God was there to show me, hey, that's not where it is. And because I was living in spiritual community, it didn't take me long to go through the maze and figure out that the answer is inside. The peace, the joy, the calmness, all the qualities of the divine are within us. And it is only when we're unitive with God, when we're in attunement with God, that we can act and not be having the compulsion to react, that our thoughts become more uplifted and draw more upliftment as a result to ourselves. There's a story that Yogananda used to tell, and I'm going to read to you just the first couple of sentences of it, because I can't possibly duplicate these words. And then I'm going to tell you the story. But it starts like this. In the nocturnal depths of a jungle in India, there lived a propitious holy master and his disciple. Away from the haunts of iniquitous desires and sense-drugging environment, these childlike human gods of simplicity led a naive, natural, free from the travails of unfulfilled, increasing hopes life. So they separated themselves, as monastics in all traditions have done, and as needed to be done in that age. In this age, Yogananda shows us that we look for the divine in life. So we don't separate ourselves from life, but we look for the divine in life. Anyway, he starts the story that way, which I thought was pretty right on for this topic. And then what happened was this one disciple, he was a little judgmental and getting frustrated with the life there and the daily duties. And he went to his master and he said, I want to leave. I lived in a wealthy home with my parents, and I don't see that my chores there were very much different than the chores you're giving me here, and I just want to go off by myself. And the master, of course, recognized the fallacy in that thinking and said, you have some fallacy in that thinking. But he went anyway. He left, and he left the ashram with 2 little pieces of cloth, loincloth, that he alternated each day. So the first night, he found a tree to go to sleep under, and he hung up the second loincloth. And when he woke up in the morning, it had holes in it because a mouse had found it and started eating holes into it. And just then a villager came walking by and saw the frustration in this disciple and asked what was wrong, and the disciple explained. His name was Ram, by the way, I'll just call him Ram. And he explained what had happened, and the villager said, oh, no worries. He said, all you need is a cat. And I know where there is a cat that I can give to you. So he came back just a short time later with this cat, gave it to Ram. Ram was grateful. And sure enough, the cat took care of the mice, and so no more holes in his clothes. But then a villager came walking by again, and he said, now I have this cat, but I need to feed the cat, and I don't have any food. So the villager said, oh, no worries. He said, I have a cow I can give you, and the cow can give the cat milk. So he went and got the cow, and Ram was very grateful. And, about a year went by, And the villager came by again, and Ram said, you know, I just don't have enough food to feed the cow. And the villager said, oh, no worries. He said, you know, just have him go to the village where we live nearby, and there's lots of fields there and food. Well, the cow went and he foraged in their gardens, and it was a nightmare for the villagers. So after some time of that, he explained it, Ram, to the villager passing by again. And the villager said, you know, we're very unhappy with this particular solution because he's ruining our fields. And, you know, somebody's got to come and fix these fields. And so Ram said, well, what do I do? And the villager said, well, I'll bring you some children from the village who can help you with this. So he brought the children helped Ram repair the fields, and that was going well, except then the villager walked by and said, well, we need the children to do chores at our house. And you have them all the time. That isn't working. You should have your own children. And so Ram said, well, how am I going to have children? I'm not married. And he said, well, oh, no worries. One of us can give you a wife. Our daughters, you know, some of our daughters are ready to be married, so we'll present one of them to you, which they did. And then there were preparations for a big wedding feast. And just at that time, the guru, the master, was meditating, and he had this thought that he should check on Ram. So he went out and he found Ram, and he found Ram getting ready in regalia to get married. And he said, what are you doing? He said, you left the ashram because you thought the duties were too material for you, too materialistic for you. And now here you are, and you're getting married. What do you think you're getting into here? And Ram went, oh. So he went back home with the guru to the ashram, realizing his folly. But the point, the story has many points, but the point in relation to karma is that one thing leads to another, leads to another. I mean, we all know the drill. I'm looking around the room and I see all these knowing eyes going, oh yeah, I've experienced that. That's what happens to us. So how do we turn that around? How do we transcend our karma? First and foremost, we pray, and we ask God to work through us, to be with us. The more we act with that spirit and that intention, the less the karma sticks to us. It's like writing on water. It doesn't stay. We can be less in the thought of, I'm a victim. Somebody is doing this to me. We can more take responsibility for our actions and our thoughts. There's a story that I like. I don't have time to tell all of it, but it's a father and two daughters in Holland during World War II. They were devout Christians, and they took in Jews and hid them in their home. And then at a certain point, they were caught. The family was caught, and they were arrested and brought to a concentration camp. And they were still very devout Christians. And the Jews back in their house were hiding in the hiding place and were not found, so they ended up being safe. But in the end, the father and the eldest daughter couldn't survive the concentration camp. And the eldest daughter, she was dying, says to her sister, "Please go around and talk to as many people as you can and tell them there's no pit so deep that God isn't deeper still." And so, very poignant, very meaningful, and very important thought. Because when we're in the midst of, how is it fair unless karma and reincarnation work together? I was so thrilled when I first rediscovered, because it seemed like very familiar to me, but when I rediscovered the philosophies, the doctrines of karma and reincarnation, because how can we balance out our action in any one given lifetime? It's just not possible. What to speak of our thoughts, our billions of thoughts. And so we, a little child is born handicapped. Another child is born in an abusive family. There's just all these terrible things. How can it be? Well, there's two ways it can be. One is reincarnation. It can be a reaction to something in a prior life. But the second one is tapasya, which is that it's not at all a reaction to something we did. It is a test to help us raise our energy above that, whatever the test is. Yogananda was alive during World War II, and he knew about all the horrors that were going on. But he said at the same time, there were saints being born through that process. So we don't know. I have so many people who tell me, I have this ache and this pain, but I don't want to tell anybody because I don't want anybody to know that I just had this happen because clearly I deserved it. People do that. We self-judge. And there's no point to that because like the reading said this morning, we can't see it. Only a master, only a self-realized soul can see the big picture. All we can do is our best. And all we can do is try to live with God, in God.